Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Jeffrey Halstead, DMD. Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram. Today we continue our series previewing local elections across the region by catching up with one of the candidates running for Seneca Falls Town Board. Steve Churchill joins me in studio. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. We just discussed that before we came on the air. It's probably been 6, 7, 8 years.
You've been around in local politics for a long time. As long as I've been covering Seneca County and Seneca Falls, you have been a mainstay in local politics. Why are you running this time? What's your why?
Well, it wasn't planned. I mean, when I first ran for the board, which was six elections ago now, I certainly didn't expect nor necessarily desire to be here running again for a sixth term. But, there's a lot that needs to be done in this county and in this town now. Specifically. So I got involved 4 years ago, and folks kind of know what my big issue is for me, and that's, seeing that landfill gets closed sooner than later. But there's certainly a lot of other things that need our attention in Seneca Falls, and hopefully my experience and my commitment is something that the folks want and need.
Biggest issues you're hearing from voters as you go through the campaign process?
Biggest issue I hear from? Well, it's funny, you don't hear from voters a whole lot. I mean, there's a handful of voters. I got an earful the other night. A woman called and spoke to me. We talked for probably about a half hour, and she said she represented a handful of her friends as well. And she was very interested in the health of this town. She's very interested in the future for our kids, specifically teenagers, that there's nothing for them to do, that the rec is closed on the weekends early, where before COVID it was staying open later. So she had some big concerns. The landfill certainly is a big concern when you talk to people. Most people that talk to you are against the landfill. I think the folks that support the landfill, there's certainly some that speak up, but not many. And taxes, although the taxes in our town are not out of the ordinary or not extraordinary by any measure. Surrounding communities, a lot of them pay more taxes than we do. But those are the big issues.
Let's talk a little bit about the landfill, because obviously that is one of the biggest issues Seneca Falls has on its plate right now. Going through the Seneca Meadows is going through the permitting process. In your view, how should the town board approach this if the extension is granted versus if the extension is not granted by the DEC?
Well, if it is granted, to be honest with you, I don't know how the town is supposed to approach it. I mean, they're talking about potentially paying the town upwards of $10 million a year. And I'm sure that makes people's eyes open and glaze over and makes them dizzy. But at the end of the day, to me, you got to ask yourself the question, if somebody's going to give you $10 million a year, what's wrong? What aren't they telling you? Why would any company have to give you $10 million a year in order for you to support them? And I think we all know the answer. It's a dirty, dirty industry. And we're paying the price. And $10 million, to be honest with you, doesn't even cover it. So to me, the only path forward is for the landfill to close sooner than later. It was slated to close in 2025. And not because Seneca Falls was closing it. That was the end of their operating permit. Seneca Falls did pass local law, which said no new expansions past that point in time. But it's if it doesn't close, there's certainly so many negatives that the town is probably going to shrivel up and die and have a lot of money in the bank, but it's not going to be a very good place to live. So,
what do you say to the folks who offer the counter to that, which is if Seneca Meadows isn't here and that money isn't rolling into the town's coffers, that taxes will go up to maintain services and operating will be a challenge?
Well, most communities in New York State don't have a mega landfill sitting pumping anywhere near this amount of money, or even a little. We have $3 million a year today. They don't get that, and they survive. It's a struggle. It's tough in today's economy, and the reality is the old mill towns have lost a lot of the old industries. But we're very fortunate in that we have history. We have a beautiful area. We have tourism. We have a lot of opportunities, and a lot of those are being flaunted, and a lot of those are being overshadowed by the presence of the landfill. And some people argue, well, it'll always be here even if we close it down. It's true, but it won't be double in size, and it won't be smelling to the extent it is today, and it won't be bringing trucks in 24/7 across our roads, and it won't be injecting what I think is, I liken the money to cocaine, and people in the communities around here walk around in a stupor because of that dump money. We can't think straight. There's a lot of fighting. I mean, it's just really fracturing the community. So it just has to close. I mean, I kind of get around to that same ending line, but we got to close it.
There are other environmental issues that are in some ways just as pressing. HABs, invasive species,
absolutely,
health of Cuga Lake in general. You've been on the forefront of a lot of these issues over the last 10 to 15 years. When you think about the other environmental issues, how would you like to see the town board approach them, given that, for example, the HABs problem doesn't seem to be lessening, and Cuga Lake had another really tough year for HABs that were reported. How would you like to see the town approach that one?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. Cuga Lake has probably the largest, if not the largest, HABs harmful algae bloom problem in the Finger Lakes, of all the Finger Lakes, and maybe even the state. I don't know that there's a whole lot the town can do. We're probably getting ourselves boxed into the reality that we probably need to increase our infrastructure by adding filters at some point in time that are going to take out toxins. Waterloo has just about completed a project to do that at their water treatment plant. So unfortunately, we'll probably be doing that sometime in the future. But there certainly are things that all of the towns can do. Farming is a big contributor to dumping a lot of the phosphorus and nitrogens and the things that feed these algae blooms into the lake. And there's some simple solutions to that, hedgerows and buffers, a thing of the past, ought to be brought back. We know how to do things. I mean, HABs weren't a problem 20, 25, 30 years ago. Well, why weren't they a problem? What were we doing right then? It seems like we were doing so much right, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago on the environmental front without even trying and not even realizing we were doing it. Even the landfill, again, we one of the reasons it exists is because the amount of waste that we generate each and every day. Go to a fast food restaurant and you're going to leave 10 pounds of waste behind. Multiply that by, millions and millions of people in the Northeast, and you can kind of see the issue. But, to get back to your previous question, I did want to say one of the things that's come to light in the town of Seneca Falls, where people are afraid of our taxes going up. Well, they shouldn't be, number one. If our taxes go up a little bit, over a number of years, that's just natural. I mean, things cost more. But the town of Seneca Falls, recently, our town manager, and I got to give him credit for this, has been digging into the books and come to find out that town of Seneca Falls is sitting on some tens of millions of dollars in bank accounts that I've been on the board for 4 years. I didn't know it existed. I don't think anybody else on the board knew that we had that money sitting in bank accounts. And the reality is that with the right investment of upwards of $30 million or more dollars, this town could essentially offset the dump money and not have to rely on it going forward, almost infinitum. So people shouldn't be so afraid of the tax issue. The landfill wants you to be afraid of it. The big PACs that send out, flyers. We just got one this past week. They want you to be afraid of the increasing tax, but the sky is not falling, folks. Our taxes aren't going to go up. And the other thing is, this town there's a lot of rooms to cut. There really is a lot of room to cut. We're going through budget workshops right now, and we're not cutting a lot. I'm one Democrat. They're 4 Republicans, and although they supposedly are supposed to be the most fiscal responsible party, the proof is not in the pudding. I mean, they just aren't. They spend. And to be honest with you, I fought against some spending that if I wasn't there, they would have spent more. So, no, there's a lot of ways that we can tighten our belts in Seneca Falls and don't need to be dependent on that money.
You mentioned infrastructure with regard to the lakes and HABs, but also infrastructure related to residential flooding, which has become more of an issue over the last couple of years with extreme weather events.
Everywhere.
But especially in communities with older infrastructure.
Yes.
How do you think the town should approach this one over the next, this is probably a 5 to 10 year thing more than it is a next year thing, but how should this be approached so that it can be managed and mitigated?
Well, I think we are approaching it the proper way, except, not completely. I think we need to, and there has been studies over the years. There needs to be probably some more studies, and then a concrete plan put together and implemented. But we are addressing fixing the hot spots, the bad spots, addressing those first and kind of working our way out. There's infrastructure money that's been put out there by the federal government, the Biden administration, and we need to take advantage of getting as much of that as we can and as quickly as we can and put that to work. There's a lot of it, so it should be able to help us address a lot of those issues. But you're right. It's pervasive. It's every community. We all need to do it. Is anything 100%? No, unless you dug up the entire village and built it from scratch. There's always going to be some issues, but we certainly we're certainly capable of fixing a lot of them.
Housing. It's been a long time since the town of Seneca Falls has seen a new single-family housing development. Frankly, a lot of communities across the region have that same problem. Is there something that you think of from time to time that could potentially free things up so that developers could look at Seneca Falls and say, I want to go there. I want to build a new track there?
Well, I said it earlier. I don't know if I said it while we were on the air, but the landfill has a spoon in every pot, and I think a lot of folks aren't going to come to this area because we have that active landfill, and unfortunately, that hurts us. But it is true. I mean, a lot of single-family homes aren't being built in a lot of areas unless you get closer to the city, I guess. And my daughter right now is looking for a single-family home, and there just aren't any on the market. And let's face it, homes exist and are built when you have industry and jobs, and we don't have any in this area. As a matter of fact, we're losing them rather than growing them. I mean, Gould's is kind of, tightening its belt, and to some folks the handwriting's on the wall there, and I certainly hope they don't pack up and leave someday. But I think the town could do a better job in sitting down with Gould's management and seeing if there's anything we can do to help make sure that their roots stay in Seneca Falls. I mean, we have to do that. We need to do that with the chiropractic college. We need to do it with Bonadent and Waterloo Container. We need to help these industries grow. And again, I think shutting the landfill is one of the ways to do that. I know that Bonadent has always been opposed to the expansion of that landfill. And it has hurt them, and from time to time. They've brought in potential employees that have decided not to come because of the landfill. So, yeah, single-family homes, that's a tough nut to crack for sure. But, we can, but we need to bring in some jobs. We need to get downtown booming again, and that's tied to the tourism. People come to this town. There's not much down there, so they may not come back. We want them to come back. My wife and I go to Skinny Alice a lot. Why do you go there? Well, you can, walk in and out of the same shops over and over and over. People just like to do that. Yeah. But here we don't have that. So we need to bring that downtown.
Do you think it's more, and kind of drawing back to your experience at the county level as well with this question, do you think it's more fruitful for a town like Seneca Falls to think more about trying to grow the really small micro businesses versus trying to see that big, large employers choose spots in Seneca Falls? Obviously, both would be great, but is one easier to pursue than the other?
I don't think either are easy. I think they're both hard, and you need to do it consistently. You can't just have an effort that maybe you sit down with those folks once and then you don't sit down again for whatever, maybe until a crisis comes along. It'd be nice to think, and again, that woman I spoke with the other night was kind of pushing that, the town we need to get the downtown open. It looks like hell, and it does look like hell. It really does. We need to get it going. And so you kind of I ask myself, as being a town council member, well, what can we really do? I mean, we can and do look for those grants and dollars from the state and the federal government that we can then use to incent businesses. And we have given that to a lot of businesses to help them with their storefront DRI initiative. But that's really not enough. I mean, even on the DRI front, we've had a couple of projects essentially turn their money back in. They aren't going to go forward with the projects. It's a huge dynamic that it needs a lot of attention. We have an economic development, arm of the town. You would like to hope that they could get stuff going, but I don't know. Again, I'm not going to lie to folks. There's no easy answers. But one thing I did tell that woman on the phone was, look, one of the answers is for folks like you to come into the board meeting, get up in front of the board, and tell us what's on your mind, and tell us what thoughts you have. Tell us what you think we might be or should be doing. And that's what we need. We need input from the public. I don't get a lot of. I've been on the board 4 years, and I'll bet you I've received maybe phone calls that I could fill one hand on. It's kind of surprising to me. Very few people come to the board meetings. It's the same people that come, and again, it's probably under 10. Yeah. The board just went through a process and put together a comprehensive plan. 140 pages of the way that we kind of it kind of outlines and sets up a framework of how we should proceed for the next 15, 20 years. But again, I'd argue, I'm going to hold this up, it's 140 pages, that most people in this town haven't seen this, read it. It was posted on our webpage, but only for about 2 weeks prior to it being approved by the board. I solely was the sole person who kind of objected to the haste of this whole project. They started it in December, January of this year. Was by their own assessment should take 12 to 15 months, and it was completed and published in 7. The public got an opportunity to look at it for, like I say, maybe 4 weeks, and then it was voted on. I was trying to argue that, folks, this needed a lot more public input. They needed to be able to see it, read it, and comment on it. And I think we missed the boat on it. Now, it's a living document, so it's certainly not the end of it, but we rushed right through it, and I really don't know why. I'm kind of dumbfounded why everybody seemed to think that we needed to get it done in 7 months. But
You mentioned the DRI, and I think probably one of the bigger questions or criticisms that have come, not related to the landfill, that have come up that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years is it doesn't feel like a ton of change has happened since the DRI was ultimately won by the town. And it kind of feels like, by what you were saying, that there is a bit of that. Where do you sit with that, and how does that kind of, when you look at the future of Seneca Falls and you think about that, and having a couple projects, apparently say, thanks, but no thanks. How does that affect kind of that long-term outlook for, Seneca Falls?
Well, one of the things that Seneca Falls suffered from, like the rest of this world, right, is COVID. And we were lucky enough to be awarded the DRI right at the beginning of COVID. So that pretty much was a gut punch. The whole thing was essentially put on hold for a couple years. And it really just started probably, it's just started to get rolling this year, 3 years after we were essentially awarded it. Well, a lot of things changed in 3 years. We all see what the economy has done. We all see what the retail space is doing. We all see what, bars and restaurants and food prices and everything. Everybody's is hurting on those fronts. It was different before COVID, and it's quite different now. And I think that's impacted. It really kind of sucked a lot of air out of the DRI initiatives and the project and just the whole thing overall. So I think that was the biggest problem with the DRI initiative was COVID. So we're trying to pick up the pieces, but again, some of those folks that are turning the money back in, they've had a downturn in their businesses, and that it just doesn't make sense necessarily for them to go forward with something that looked really, really good and shiny, in 2019, early 2020. So.
Fire protection, EMS, police, public safety.
Yep.
Do you feel like the town of Seneca Falls is in a good spot right now with those services? And what do you think the items are within that category that the town board should be keeping an eye on over the next few years?
Well, we just had a member from the North Seneca Ambulance come in and present to us at one of our budget hearings this past week. And they're essentially at the abyss, right? They're about they don't have any funding. I mean, in a nutshell, 50 years ago when they formed, it was all volunteer. There was no salaries, just volunteer. And so insurance and people paying for the services and donations covered it. Here we are 50 years later, and there are no volunteers. There's 30 full-time employees, 14 part-time employees. Medicaid pays for about maybe half of what it costs them to roll that ambulance out the doors and go pick up a person. Medicaid will cover half of it. The rest of it, they lose money. So every time they roll out the doors, they're losing money. Medicare is the same way. So they're really they're in a pickle, and they need funding, and they need it desperately. It's not their fault. It just seems like so many of the other things, that are going on with what it costs to run an operation. So they went to the board, the county board, made an appeal. Well, it turns out that the folks in the south end of the county, they have South Seneca Ambulance. The 4 towns down there have already kind of solved the issue. They chipped in, and they're keeping South Seneca afloat. And their attitude is, well, the north end, you guys figure it out with North Seneca Ambulance. So they're coming to the remaining 6 towns in the north end and appealing to them to pitch in and help them stay afloat. And if we want ambulance service, we probably have to in some measure. The county board decided that it really is up to the towns to take care of this. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Being on the county board, I don't know why they would do that. We're all in the same, but we're all one county, number one. And like recycling, which is just a line item on the bottom of our county tax bill, say it's $40 a year to pick up our recycling. I think whatever the works out to pay for the ambulances, and I would combine them into the Seneca County ambulance service, not North Seneca and South Seneca. I mean, I could be in the South End having a great time and have a heart attack, and I like to think that the South Seneca, and vice versa for the folks down there that are up here at Walmart and maybe have a heart attack, North Seneca. So it's just one ambulance service and one line item on our tax bill. Maybe it's $50, $60 a year, and it pays for our ambulance service. Done, simple. But instead, they're pushing it back to the ambulance service to go and work with 10, in this case, 6 different towns and negotiate. That's absolutely ridiculous. But it looks like it's going to have to be done. And Seneca Falls, if we want ambulance service, is going to have to pay for that.
And to your point, Wayne and Yates counties have already gone this route as well with a countywide
and
service.
I read today Auburn has they're having a problem with one of their ambulance service, getting ready to shutter themselves in the end of the year.
Firefighters, obviously volunteer fire department.
Probably heading down the same path.
Right. Volunteer numbers obviously declining, kind of piggybacks with population decline.
Yep.
Is this something that just the town needs to have a watchful eye on, or expect the same outcome over a certain number of years?
I think you got to expect the same outcome. I mean, I think, look, that's what government does. I mean, what government does is they decide how we take our tax dollars, how we take and pay for the things that society values. And I think one of the things is, we value schools, we value roads and plowing, and whatever the consensus is that's what we want to have, then that's what the tax dollars have to pay for. And if I think we would all agree we need police protection, we need fire, we need ambulance, and those things cost money. So I think that there's enough people that say, yeah, they cost money and we're going to have to pay for them somehow.
Last question for you. Where can folks learn more about your campaign?
I do have another cell phone number, though, but it's out there in any of the websites. The Democratic website's got my number out there that you can contact me. My email's out there. On the town website, people can contact me that way. But I think I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. But I think this election is critical. I was not going to run, and I'm going to tell folks that. I wasn't going to run. And one of the reasons, the primary reason I am running is to try and get that landfill closed. I just be frank with folks. That's the issue for me. I work hard on every other issue as well. And I think if folks watched the videos, I'd like to see them come to the meetings, although they're long and pretty painful to sit through. I kind of get that. But if you watch them, they're all available and you can watch them online. I fight for the folks in this town. I mean, I try to do the right thing. I try to, keep a watchful eye on the dollars and not just, it's taxpayers' money. It's the people's money in Seneca Falls. We need to be careful with it. We can't just spend. But myself, I can't do it. I mean, I'm currently on the board with 4 Republicans, and I'll be honest with you, they're spending. If you're afraid of spending, you don't want to vote for the 2 Republicans that are running. They're going to spend your dollars. And I think a lot of it is because they think we have a lot of it, the dump dollars, and let's just spend. And I don't care if we have the dump money or not. That doesn't mean we should just spend money willy-nilly. We should try to be conservative, fiscally conservative, and take care of what we really need. That said, Jackson Polera, who I'm running with, he's my fellow Democrat. Young Jackson, who's an outstanding young man, has been coming to our town board meetings for the past year or so, sits through the whole thing, God bless him, really cares about this community. He's a smart kid. He's got a 4-year degree out of Ithaca College. He's got a job up at Waterloo Container. We need to get Jackson elected, and we need to get Steve Churchill elected. If you want to close that dump and you really care about this community and you don't want to see it get destroyed, then you got to vote for myself and Jackson Polera.
Steve, appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for this edition of FLX Today. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, check out the show on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to the FingerLakes1.com YouTube channel. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.